One cold, windy morning in the tranquil Virginia Bay, a 73-year-old American veteran had his small boat seized by the Coast Guard simply because a tattered U.S. flag flew from its stern. Not a weapon, not drugs, just an old flag patched by his own hand for years, a living piece of his memory. He did not resist. He did not rage. But what lay behind that silence? Why would a soldier who sacrificed his youth for his country be treated this way? And what happened just an hour later when 6 Navy vessels appeared on the horizon, leaving the entire coastal town speechless? This is not merely a story about an administrative penalty. It is a question of honor, of memory, and of a journey that made a nation reconsider how we treat those who safeguarded our freedom. Do not look away. Watch until the end, and subscribe to Veteran Best Stories, where the stories do not leap from the page, but are etched deep into America's heart. Howard Jensen lived alone in an old wooden house nestled on the shore of Yorktown's inlet. That house had been built by his own hands, alongside his late wife's, after he completed his 3rd tour in the Middle East, when the war had taken so much from him: his youth, his sleep, and his closest friends. At 73, many might choose to rest, but Howard had never spent a day without facing the sea. Each morning, before the sun could light the water, he would carefully untie the mooring lines, push his battered wooden boat away from the dock, and row through the thin, silken mist lying upon the waves. To strangers, the boat meant nothing special. Its hull was worn and scuffed, its paint flaking away with age. But to him, it was his soul, a part of his body, a place where he could sit in quiet conversation with comrades who had fallen. Atop the cabin flew an old American flag, secured by a stainless steel frame, still unfurling whenever the sea breeze arrived. That flag had been torn by shrapnel during a bombardment in Fallujah. Howard had kept it, mending each rip with needle and thread using the same unsteady hands that shook from cold and memories after he left the service. To him, it was not just a symbol. It was the last thing he possessed from those who never returned. Howard was not the kind to recount his own heroism. He had never given an interview, nor accepted invitations to honor ceremonies. He wore no medals. He hung no photographs on his walls. His loyalty needed no words. His past, painful as it was, remained locked within him, like a private national anthem only triggered when the waves struck his hull. Each morning, he set out to sea. Each evening, he returned. The sun would sink beyond the bay, wrapping the day in deep orange light. Howard would tie up his boat, step onto the dock, and quietly wipe each plank of wood, sometimes pausing to stroke the flag as if it were an old, familiar hand placing itself on his shoulder. He needed no one to understand that. He only needed to keep doing it. But that particular morning, something in the air felt different. The clouds hung low, the wind was fierce, the sea seemed unsettled. He set out as usual. The waves were not high, but the wind whispered warnings. He paid no mind. For him, only when adrift among those waves could his mind find peace. As he prepared to turn his boat back to the dock, a loud engine roared behind him. A Coast Guard vessel was closing in. Howard glanced over his shoulder. Strangers, none of the faces who used to wave at him on calm mornings, not local fishermen. The men aboard wore uniforms, their faces as rigid as orders, their eyes speaking only authority. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker, without greeting, without emotion. "Private fishing vessel, stop immediately!" Howard eased off the throttle, gripping the tiller tightly. The Coast Guard ship drew alongside. An officer climbed aboard, handed him a pre-printed form, a citation for administrative violation, and read each word aloud. You are cited for flying a national flag improperly on a private fishing boat. Next time, your vessel may be confiscated." Howard said nothing. His lips pressed together. He did not argue or protest. He only offered a slight nod, then slowly turned to look up at the cabin roof. The flag still flew, but now it was no longer a symbol of triumph. It was the target of an unseen judgment. A gust of wind blew harder than usual, making the flag lash against the wooden hull with a harsh crack, as if it too were wounded by what it had once represented. There was no anger on Howard Jensen's face, but in his eyes something quietly shattered. Not because of the fine, not because of the paperwork, but because he felt stripped of something sacred, taken not by an enemy, but by those in uniform, only differing in color. His boat turned toward the dock. The waves remained gentle, but the water felt heavier. All the way back, he did not take his eyes off the flag, as if offering an apology, as if reminding himself not to be angry, for honor to him had never been something to shout about. It was silence, the kind one only recognizes when it is lost. That afternoon, when he tied the boat to the dock, folded the citation, and tucked it into his jacket pocket, he told no one what had happened. He simply wiped the salt from the hull as he always did. But if anyone looked closely into his eyes, they would see he was no longer the silent man he had been. Something was stirring within him, not on the outside, but deep inside, an old wound, freshly reopened. News spread faster than the sea breeze. Only hours after Howard Jensen's old wooden boat was towed away by the Coast Guard from the harbor, a short video began circulating on social media. The shaky camera angle, filmed from behind, captured the moment Jensen stood silently as his boat was led away, the faded American flag still fluttering in the wind. The videographer, a fisherman living near the harbor, said little, only adding a caption. "He used to be a soldier, and this is how they treat him." Within 30 minutes, thousands of shares appeared, not because of the clip's length, nor its image quality. What made people unable to look away was the old man's expression in the video. A solitary figure, not resisting, not screaming, yet haunting. The symbol of loyalty being judged like a crime. In a world that seems to move quickly and forget easily, that image cut deeply into the faith of millions. Comments began appearing in droves. Some were furious. Others quietly wrote, "That could be my father." An Iraq veteran's account left a simple 4-word note. "I know that feeling." Amid thousands of emotional posts, a private message slipped quietly into the Navy's internal command system. The sender was a senior officer stationed in the East, and the man mentioned in that message was Howard Jensen himself. Years ago, in the dusty fields of Kandahar, during a sudden ambush, it was Howard, then a sergeant, who had spun his Humvee around, despite heavy fire, to pull that young soldier from a burning, overturned vehicle. No one asked him to do it. No one expected he would survive. But Howard did not reason much. He simply did what he believed was right. If today he is humiliated for flying the flag that once covered the blood of our comrades, the message concluded, then the honor of all of us is being humiliated too. That message did not lie dormant. It struck right at the heart, not by rank or rhetoric, but by the moral weight of a man who once owed his life to the man now being punished in silence. Less than an hour later, at the Norfolk base, one of the largest naval outposts on the Atlantic, emergency lights illuminated the Fleet Command Center. Duty officers received an extraordinary alert, not from a security system or a natural disaster, but from the conscience of men. No administrative order, no press conference, no need for higher approval. There was only one decision. delivered in the calm yet weighty voice of the fleet commander, a man who had fought alongside Howard years ago. "Put to sea. Bring the flag." The order required no further explanation. Everyone present understood the deeper meaning beyond any official report. This was not merely a response. It was a reply of honor, a way for the institution once defended by Howard at the risk of his life to now stand up to protect him, not with words, but with action. One by one, the ships began to depart the harbor. No fanfare, no headlines, no announcements in the press. Yet each hurried step, every engine starting, every flag meticulously folded and prepared to be hoisted, all carried an unspoken ceremonial weight. Beneath the fading afternoon sun, 6 naval vessels surged out of the bay in perfect formation, like outstretched arms. On each deck, officers simultaneously affixed special flag frames, not following the administrative code, but the style of a mourning flag, large, draping straight, covering nearly half the side of the ship. Viewed from above, the alignment of the 6 ships formed an honor guard, silently moving toward the place where Howard Jensen had been judged just hours before. No loudspeakers, no leading media, but each wave beneath the hull seemed to understand. This time, the sea carried more than people. It carried a response the entire nation awaited. In Yorktown, people began gathering along the waterfront. First came a few neighbors, then a group of local veterans, then strangers, those who had only seen the clip hours before but could not sit still. No one told anyone else, yet everyone gazed toward the open sea, where the silhouettes of ships began to rise on the horizon. Howard Jensen still sat on the dock, hands resting on his thighs, eyes fixed on the water. He had no idea what was coming, but inside him something shifted, a strange feeling, neither pure hope nor pure fear. He only knew that this time the waves were bringing something that did not belong to silence. The sky above Yorktown's inlet seemed to sag in a moment of strange stillness. No clouds, no bird song, only the salty tang in the air and the gentle slap of waves against the old wooden dock. Locals began gathering along the waterfront, in small clusters, their eyes searching as if everyone sensed something looming that no one could name. They had not come because they were invited. They came because of an overwhelming silence, one that compelled them to leave their homes. Then, from the distance, through the thin haze of the early sea air, the silhouettes of ships appeared on the horizon. 1, then 2, then 3, until all 6 gray-painted vessels came into view, advancing toward the bay like a silent escort. They did not charge in as they usually would. Their engines were throttled back to near whisper, leaving only the hush of hulls cutting through water and the faint ripple of waves trailing behind. No one shouted. No one fumbled for a phone. They stood, still as if witnessing a ceremony they dared not interrupt. The presence of 6 Navy ships did not feel threatening, but rather declarative. Something so real, so immense was being affirmed, not by law, but by conscience. Each ship positioned itself precisely across the bay, spacing calculated like an honor guard. No horns, no announcements, no introductions. Then, almost simultaneously, on every deck, officers raised massive American flags, 10 times the size of standard ensigns, heavy and gravity-bound, yet they snapped sharply to life as the sea breeze swept by. The sound of fabric striking the air rang out in rapid pulses, like heartbeats echoing through the stillness. Each fierce swell of cloth was a statement, a response to an insult that needed no words. In the pale morning light, the white stars on deep blue, the interwoven red stripes, Suddenly, these became living symbols, no longer mere objects. On shore, Howard Jensen's old wooden boat lay unmoved, neither drifting nor creaking, as if it too were listening. The small flag he had secured to the cabin roof, the same one torn during the Battle of Fallujah and lovingly mended by his own hand after his discharge, still fluttered, but this time it stood not alone. Before it, dozens of enormous flags snapped in the wind like outstretched arms, as if embracing it within a forest of memories. Howard stood beside his boat. He said nothing. He did not raise a salute. He only placed his thin, calloused hand over his heart, where his pulse still beat slow but steady for this country. That gesture, so simple that many might overlook it, in that moment became a vow, not spoken, but written in blood, in years, in a lifetime of silent service. His face revealed no overt emotion, yet if one looked closely, they would see moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes, not from pride, but from a deep stirring he thought no longer possible, true understanding. There were no television cameras, no reporters jostling for the story, but their absence made everything feel more real than ever. This was no performance. This was a response of honor. Tears began glistening on the faces of those by the dock. No one wept aloud. They simply stood, hands clasped, some pressing palms to their hearts, others bowing their heads in quiet reverence. They did not cry for Howard Jensen. They cried because they realized that sometimes justice does not emerge from a courtroom. It rises from the human heart, from unity that needs no proclamation. And amidst it all, Howard remained motionless. He did not look up. He did not bow his head. He merely let the wind carry the sound of flags flapping into his soul. He knew there were wounds no words could heal, but there were also wounds that only a single look could close. Today he had received that look, not from one person, but from an entire fleet, from his community. Waves continued lapping gently at his boat's hull. The little flag on his cabin roof fluttered steadily. In its presence, 6 giant flags snapped in unison, and at the intersection of sky and sea, in the heart of that living tableau, something had been set right, not by slogans shouted, but by presence spoken in silence. No one claimed sole credit. No one was branded the villain. There was only a veteran, a flag, and a nation, in that moment, reconnecting with all the sincerity once thought lost. Dear viewers, please grab a glass of water, relax for a moment, and stay tuned for the rest of the story. It still holds surprises. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see people joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you find this story moving so we can continue bringing you more compelling tales. News of the Sea of Flags in Yorktown spread like a tsunami. Within hours, it had flooded social media, evening newscasts, and local papers. An amateur photographer, using a travel camera, captured just the moment 6 Navy ships formed a line, each American flag unfurling in the wind as if whispering an ancient vow. The image went viral at lightning speed, and only one headline repeated itself: "When honor needs no voice." Americans everywhere saw it, from veterans in Ohio to high school students in Arizona. Each read the story in their own way, but all felt something stir within. No one told them to be moved, yet pride, silent and long asleep, awoke in the hearts of millions. Then they began converging on Yorktown, not as tourists, but as pilgrims. The road into town stretched into a convoy, pickup trucks flying flags, minivans sporting plates from Georgia, Kentucky, Vermont. There were no invitations, no festivals, yet quiet footfalls still streamed toward the harbor, where Howard Jensen's battered wooden boat remained moored as if never having left. People gathered around the boat, no fences, no signs. Only a thin rope tied across it, as a reminder, this space demands respect. A middle-aged man, name unknown, knelt and placed a wildflower bouquet at the boat's bow. A little girl, perhaps 8 years old, laid down a crayon drawing, a sketch of an old man holding a flag in front of 6 great ships. No one told her to do it. She simply felt she must. They took photos, in silence. No laughter, no crowd noise. That once bustling dock now felt like a temporary sanctuary, where each person came not to look, but to remember. Then she appeared. The old woman had driven nearly 16 hours from Maine after her granddaughter sent her the clip the night before. Her back bent, hands shaking, but her eyes sharp. When she met Howard, who still stood beside his boat each day as always, she did not offer lengthy greetings. No hug, no tears. She simply extended her hand, shook his, and said in a voice trembling yet clear, "Thank you for not lowering that flag." Howard did not know what to say. He only nodded gently, then looked toward the cabin roof. The flag still flew, faded, yet no longer alone. In that moment, he felt something astonishing, as if his silence over all those years had finally been heard, finally echoed, not with words but with action. No ceremony was staged, no stage, no speeches. Perhaps that was what made it sacred. No one orchestrated emotions. No one crafted a narrative. There were only those who truly came for something no one required them to believe, yet they chose to believe. A group of veterans stood nearby, not wearing medals, not in uniform, but their eyes shone as they looked at the boat. One of them drew from his jacket a ribbon he had worn during the Mosul campaign, placed it on the wooden deck, then stood at attention in a silent salute. The sea breeze blew gently. The flags snapped once more against the cabin. Howard turned, placed his hand lightly on the worn wood, tracing a peeling patch of paint, as if thanking the boat that had kept him company all those years. That vessel was not just transport. It was a witness, a friend, the only place he could speak to those who were gone, without fear of interruption. Along the shore, some sat on the dock, opened notepads, jotted a few lines, then closed them again. A young couple with their son, no more than 10, whispering, "This is why we stand when the national anthem plays." The sun slanted lower, bathing the water in gold. Those who came first began to make way for those who came later. No one rushed, no one jostled. Each person paused for a moment, gazed upward in quiet reverence, then quietly departed. And amidst all those footsteps, Howard still stood. He spoke no words, yet for the first time in years, he did not feel like a solitary figure on a vast shoreline. He felt part of something larger, something that could not be defined in reports, could not be measured by fines, but only sensed in the profound silence of gratitude. In a noisy world, a stage can blind people, but it is simplicity, an elderly veteran silently holding on to a small symbol that can rekindle the spirit of an entire nation. And that is why, on that day, Yorktown ceased to be just a coastal town. It became the place where all of America, for a moment, stood still, bowed its head, and remembered. On the other side of that stirring moment, where the public stood in hushed awe and thousands of eyes turned toward Yorktown, questions began seeking their origin. A fierce wave of criticism erupted, not aimed at an institution, but at a single act. The callous citation handed to a man who had sacrificed his entire life to protect the very flag he was now condemned for flying. At the local Coast Guard station, a young officer sat motionless before a computer screen, scrolling through comment after comment, replay after replay of Howard Jensen's solemn face, and that precise moment when he had handed the citation to the veteran. Howard's expression held no anger, but something unforgettable. An ache of disappointment so quiet, it hurt. That young officer, named Elliot, had graduated less than a year ago. He had been well trained, knew every regulation, understood how to respond to a violation. But no one taught him what to do when the law clashed with a living symbol of honor. Elliot lay awake all night, not out of fear of disciplinary action, but because he felt as if he'd done something that left him unable to meet his own reflection in the mirror with peace. The next morning, he began writing an apology letter. Not typed. Not in any formal administrative format, just slanted, hurried handwriting, occasionally trembling, as though each letter bore the weight of his remorse. He wrote about how he saw Mr. Jensen for the first time. Silver hair, sinewy hands that held steady, eyes calm as the sea before a storm. He explained that his decision to issue the citation did not arise from malice, but from habit, of obeying orders. Yet then he confessed that precisely that was the problem. Sometimes loyalty to regulations can lead one astray from something more sacred, loyalty to justice. The letter filled 3 pages. No excuses, no justifications. Only a plea for forgiveness, not for the wrongful act itself, but for the indifference shown to a living emblem of honor that he should have recognized with his heart, not just his eyes. That afternoon, Elliot went in person to the harbor, where Howard Jensen's wooden boat still lay as it always had. Howard stood nearby, back straight, gaze distant, as if listening to something only he could hear from the sea. Elliot wasn't in uniform. He came as an ordinary man. When he faced Mr. Jensen, he said nothing. He simply extended the letter, 2 hands offering it as a gesture of quiet respect. Howard took it, his eyes narrowing slightly against the sun, or perhaps against emotion. He did not open the letter on the spot. He only gave a faint nod, as if he already understood what needed no reading. That evening, in the simple wooden house by the inlet, Howard sat alone beneath a warm yellow light, gently opening each page of the letter. He read slowly, line after line, word after word. The room held no sound but the distant murmur of waves and the soft rustle as he folded the letter once he finished. He did not sigh. He was not overcome by emotion. He simply remained still for a long moment. In his eyes, there was no anger, but there was something else, quieter, deeper, something only those who have known loss, who have carried a vow to fallen comrades, can understand. It was the sorrow of one who, having lived long enough, realizes that not everyone knows when it is time to stand with silence. He held the old citation in his hand, the paper that once represented a cold judgment, devoid of humanity. The paper was creased, the corners worn, yet he had kept it intact in a drawer all those days. Today, he took it out one last time. Stepping to the water's edge, he said nothing. The moon began to rise, its silvery light spreading over the sea. He lifted the citation to eye level. A gentle breeze swept by, cool, pure, carrying the briny scent of salt. Then, with a decisive yet gentle motion, he tore the citation into pieces. The paper fell, unhurried, Each small fragment fluttered in the wind, turning lightly in the air before silently touching the water. No applause, no witnesses, only him, the sea, and a sense of relief. Not every mistake needs punishment. Some mistakes need to be met with humility and an earnest heart. Howard understood that. And in the moment he let those fragments drift away, he did not erase the past. He simply chose to preserve what was worth preserving: empathy. His silhouette reflected on the water, merging with the waves, vanishing into the night. And in that instant, honor no longer needed defense. It stood on its own, in dignified silence, just as Howard Jensen had lived his entire life. Since that day, Howard Jensen's wooden boat has ceased to be merely an old vessel drifting in the coastal mist. It has become a symbol that needs no stone plinth, no grand speeches, only a faded flag, a trembling hand's stitches, and an old soldier standing resolute amid wind and waves. That flag still flutters each dawn, not as part of a ceremony, but as a silent reminder. Loyalty requires no proclamation. It simply must exist, steadfast. The people who now come to Yorktown are no longer tourists. They come to stand in silence before the boat. They place their hands upon the weathered wood, bow their heads at the flagpole, as if touching a piece of America's shared memory, one that was once forgotten. No one builds a stage. No one delivers an address. Yet it is precisely that silence that makes this place sacred. They come to look, to remember, and to remind one another that some things must not be lost: a flag, a person, a truth. As for Howard, he has not changed his routine. He still heads out to sea each morning and quietly returns each evening. But one thing has changed. He is no longer alone. Each time the boat docks, someone is waiting. A nod, an understanding glance, a hand extended without need for words. Inside Howard's heart, there is no pride, only the quiet of one who has known loss and has known recognition. He needs no praise. He only needs to know that people still remember. That sacrifice is not buried by red tape or by the indifference written on paper. And if you believe that honor is not something law can grant, but something that must be nurtured by gratitude, if you believe a soldier deserves respect not only for what he did in wartime, but also for his silence afterward, please share this story. Not for drama, but for truth. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Best Stories, where memories do not fade away but are retold, so that America never forgets.